Hello, future freedivers, and thank you for joining us on this episode of the Total Beginner Freedive Podcast, brought to you by Octopus Freediving. This is episode 13 and a special episode as we have Ted Harty recording an episode for us. Ted is a U.S. national record holder and one of the top freedive educators in the United States. I first learned about Ted when he was a guest on my favorite health and fitness podcast, the Ben Greenfield Fitness Show, before I even took my first freedive course. Ted offers a great selection of online freedive courses, including the free safety course that you've heard me promoting on this podcast, which you can find at freedivepodcast.com/safety. I originally had an episode planned about how to choose a freedive course, but Ted already had a great episode on his own podcast, Freedive Live, which was Learn the 9 Best Questions to Ask Your Freedive Instructor When Looking for a Class. So I asked Ted to record a shorter version of his episode, and he kindly and graciously agreed to that. So here's Ted.
20 years stuck in the office, and now he's traveling the world. Just one breath and diving deep, he's healthier and happier than ever. Freedive nomad, he's found what he wants to do. A freediving podcast for total beginners like you. Freedive nomad, the peace into the deep blue. Make the dream come true. You can do this too.
Hey everyone, my name is Ted Harty. I'm the founder of Immersion Freediving, freedivingsafety.com, and my new podcast, Freedive Live. Ray had asked me to come on here. I did an episode a while ago on the 9 best questions to ask your freediving instructor, and he wanted to do something similar, and he asked me to just do a kind of shortened version of that podcast, so that's what I'm going to do here today. So for those of you that don't know me, I've been a freediving instructor and a competitor for over 10 years. As far as a competitive freediver, my deepest freedive is 279 feet. Longest breath hold is 7 minutes. Past U.S. freediving record holder and was captain of the U.S. freediving team at the World Championships. I've also been an instructor, freediving instructor for 12 years for performance freediving. I'm a PFI instructor trainer. I've appeared on the Discovery Channel, Tim Kennedy for his show Hard to Kill, to work with the CEO of Twitter. And I got to do a private course with Ben Greenfield and been on his podcast several times, which is pretty cool. So now let's address this question. You want to take a freediving class, but you're not sure which one to pick. How do you make a decision? And if you're new to the sport of freediving, it can be confusing on which course you should take when there's multiple courses being offered. Most people get, in my opinion, very hung up on the agency that they're choosing from. So in scuba and freediving, there's multiple agencies that you take courses for. The agency is they're the one that set out the standards. They're the one that has the manual. They're the C card that you get at the end. And there's various agencies: PADI, NAUI, SSI, TDI, ADA, Apnea Academy. I mean, this list goes on and on and on and on. SSI, there's tons of them. And I think a lot of people make their decision based on the agency because they hear, oh, this agency is terrible. This agency is the best. You're an idiot. All these people, these other agencies are terrible. And so you hear things like that, and that tends to make you pick a certain agency. So, I mean, if your friend took a SSI class and they liked it, they're like, oh yeah, SSI is awesome. Well, you're probably likely to take an SSI class. It gets even more confusing if you ask an instructor. If you ask a PADI instructor, should they take a PADI class or the SSI class, guess what the PADI instructor is going to say? He's going to say, take the PADI class. I'm an instructor trainer for Performance Freediving International. Am I biased? Yeah, I probably am, right? I've been doing it for 12 years. I think PFI is a great agency. In my opinion, very few people have the understanding to accurately compare agencies because most people aren't instructors for multiple agencies. Most students haven't taken the exact same class from multiple different agencies. What I firmly believe so much is that the instructor and the structure of the class has a much larger impact on what you're going to get out of the program than the agency. You want to find out the difference between multiple courses. It's confusing. If you have 3 level 1 classes in your area or that you could travel to, they're all taught by different instructors, they're all taught by different agencies. You as the person is going to make that decision. It's hard to you to figure out what's the difference. So that's what I'm going to help you with today. So the first thing you need to do is the websites are great. You definitely should check out the websites. Absolutely. But absolutely don't book a class until you talk to this instructor on the phone. And I'm going to give you a list of things you want to be asking the person. First off, right off the bat, one of the reasons you want to get this person on the phone is, I always use this example. Let's say you're a 50-year-old business guy and you pick up the phone and you call this instructor and he's 18-year-old and he acts and talks like he's a snowboarding instructor. That just one thing right there might just put you off to the whole thing and like, man, I can't do it. That instructor could be amazing. It could be the best instructor ever, but just from talking on the phone with someone, you're going to get a sense that, hey, maybe this isn't going to work. And if all you did was look at the website and put in your credit card and book, you wouldn't get that. So let me go over some of the questions you want to ask. You want to know how many students are going to be in the class. And put it simply, the less students that are going to be in the class, the better experience you're going to get. One instructor says, class is a max at 4 people. Another instructor says, mine max at 8 people. If all else is the same, the class with less people is going to be better. So you want to find out how many people are going to be in the program. Now, there's a little bit of nuance to that. One instructor has 8 students in the class, but he might have 4 instructors. Well, that's a whole different animal, because now you got 8 students, which I said was worse than if you only had 4 students. But if you've got 4 instructors, now you've got a 2-to-1 ratio. So you've got 2 students every instructor. That's better than 1 instructor with just 4 students, right? So, you want to find out the number of students in the class, and you want to find how many instructors are going to be in the program, as well as how many students. One of the biggest things to me, and I refer to as the structure of the program, you want to find out how many hours are you going to be in the classroom. Now, this gets a little confusing nowadays because a lot of people do more and more online learning. So some classes, there is no classroom. It's all done online. Some is you take the test online and you review a little bit in class, or some have the traditional classroom structure. I am a big fan of traditional classroom structure. I believe I can teach better than any online anything, right? So in my programs, I have tons of online classes. I have online classes on, I have a free safety course. I have a free course to increase your bottom time. I've got a course on beginning equalizing issues. I've got an at-home training plan, all these things. And my students get access to all of that stuff. Tons of them. And they go through like 4 or 5 hours of online training before they come to me. And I still do a traditional, long classroom session, because for me, I like the online stuff to be in addition to the classroom session, not a substitute for it. But everyone does it differently, and some students don't want that. Some students don't want any classroom. They just want to do it all online. So this is something to look into. Now, absolutely, the other thing you want to ask is, you want to find out how many hours in the classroom. You want to find out how many hours are you in the pool. This is super important because, when you hear like, oh, this is a level 1 class and a level 1 class, it's all the same. But if one class has an hour and a half in the pool and one class has 5 hours in the pool, holy cow, that is a completely different, totally different animal of class, because the pool is where you learn. The pool is where you learn the skills so that you can execute them in the ocean. The more pool time you have, the better you're going to be able to execute in the ocean. The ocean is not for learning. The ocean is for doing. One of the things that I strive for and talk about in my programs is I want muscle memory, right? I want these students to practice these skills over. I want them to practice them, because I do 2-3 hour pool sessions where I am, that's almost double what most people do. So when we come back the second day, we're repeating things they did the first day, so they become on autopilot. So when I take them into the ocean, they're not thinking about this thing that might be complicated. They're just executing it because they've got the muscle memory. They can just do it on command. They don't have to think about it a lot, so they can focus on the other things, right? So definitely the longer you have in the pool absolutely makes that program better, and it's going to make it so you better execute in the ocean. Now, the next thing I want you to ask the instructor is, how many hours are you going to spend actually in the open water, the ocean, the pool, quarry, or wherever you're doing the open water? You want to know how many hours are you spent diving. Not how many hours is the boat trip. How many hours will you spend in the water diving on the line? Because I don't care what freediving class you take, it's a lot of stuff thrown at you. And what you want is, you want to make it so that when you leave that class and you go out diving a week from now, you're going to be able to implement all the things that you learned, right? And repetition fixes everything. So in my classes, I do 2 ocean sessions, because I know that by doing it that second day, they're going to repeat all that stuff that they did the first day. And, the mistakes that they made, they're going to get a chance to fix them. And it's just going to make it so everything sticks, and they're going to be, transformed into this better freediver. For sure, you want to know how many hours are in you're going to be actually diving, and then how many diving sessions, right? So in my neck of the woods, most entry-level courses do one ocean session, whereas I do 2 3-hour sessions, which is way, way, way longer than what most people do, because I believe it puts out a better product. It makes the student better. Another question you want to ask the instructor is, do they do every single dive all the way down to the plate with you? Some instructors will follow the student, like I do, all the way down to the plate and then all the way back. My agency PFI requires that I do. There's no option for me. I have to. So when I'm doing 100-foot dives, 130-foot dives, I'm all the way down at the plate with the student, and then I follow them up. When you do that, you can provide better safety because you're with the student the whole time. You can see better what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, especially on those deeper 100, 130-foot dives. There's a lot of things they can do down there that can mess their technique up or cause lung squeezes, all these things. So I like to be eyeballs like right down there so I can give better feedback on what's happening. Some instructors will maybe go half the depth, or maybe they're safetying at the surface or 15 feet or some sort of variation of that. But again, I would tell you, if like one class, everything's the same, the pool session is the same, the cost is the same, the pool, the number of hours in the pool, all that is the same, and then the other one is exactly the same, and one instructor follows you to the plate and the other one doesn't, I would pick the one where the instructor follows you to the plate. I mean, wouldn't you feel more comfortable and confident knowing that your instructor is going to be right down there with you? And if something happens, you can ask them for help and get up to the surface, right? I would ask, the instructor, what is your freediving background, right? I mean, are you a lifelong scuba instructor that just picked up freediving, right, just recently? Or are you, have you been freediving all your life? I mean, what is your freediving background and experience, right? Something you want to look into. The other thing I would ask is, how deep can the instructor dive? Now, look, you did not need to be, some 300-foot freediver to be a good freediving instructor. I don't believe that at all. But what is important to me is, how deep can that instructor dive based on how deep you're going to be diving in the class, right? If the instructor is diving to, let's say it's a 60-foot class or a 20-meter class, and the instructor says, yeah, my deepest dive is 25 meters, but he's teaching the students to dive to 20 meters, that means when that instructor is going down to the plate with you, he doesn't have a lot of cushion, right? I mean, that's approaching his maximal efforts, right? That's not a position that I would want to be in as a student, because if something goes wrong down there at 20 meters, the instructor is going to be, this is hard for him, right? You want the level that you're diving to in your class should be really, really easy for the instructor, right? So for me, it just seems crazy if you're a freediving instructor that you're not at least a solid 30-meter diver, right? So if you're taking students to, 20 meters, you want to be 30, 40-meter diver where that's really, really easy, so that these dives you're doing is very simple. So that's something I think is important to look at, right? An instructor that can dive a lot deeper. That doesn't mean he's she or she is a better instructor, not at all, because how deep you dive really has no correlation to your instructional ability at all, but it does have correlation to how easy those dives are going to be for the instructor. The easier the dive is for the instructor, the better safety they can provide and the better feedback they can do. I mean, if the dives are easy for the instructor, they're going to be more focused on all the little things that you're doing wrong. And trust me, I know this, because when I started, I was not a good enough diver, and the dives were so difficult for me. I was having such strong contractions. I was not able to focus on, all the things I should be as the student doing the dive. I'm just trying to not die because the dives were too difficult for me. So that's what you want to avoid. You also want to ask, how long have they been teaching and how many students have they taught? I mean, I've been teaching for 12 years. I've taught, thousands of students. I can promise you, the freediving class I would teach today compared to my first freediving class, 12 years ago when I started immersion freediving, there's no comparison between those courses. Obviously, when you've been teaching all this time, so many years, so many classes, of course, you're going to get better, right? So, again, another thing to look at when you're deciding between an instructor is, how long have they been teaching and how many years and how many students do they have, right? Because if you've been teaching for 5 years, but you've only taught 4 classes, the fact that they've been teaching for 5 years really doesn't mean much, right? So you want to look at both, how long and how many students have they taught. You also want to ask, do they have any reviews? Where can you see his or her reviews online? Because that's going to be another way to kind of get some impact on some idea what the class is actually like. Another thing you want to ask, I even hate that we even have to ask this, I've always been a little confused by this, but you want to ask the instructor, do they teach the Frenzel method of equalization? I will tell you, in my opinion, the dirty little secret in this freediving business is, I think between 30%, 20 to 40% maybe 20 to 30%, somewhere in that range of people that take an entry-level freediving class get stuck at 15, maximum 30 feet because they can't equalize their ears. Their ears always hurt. They can't equalize when their head down. They can only equalize when their head is pointed up. And it's because, this is all very technical, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole of this, but it's because when you're freediving, you must be doing the Frenzel method of equalization, right? Not Valsalva. When you're doing Valsalva, I've taught 1,000 students, almost every single one I've seen that does Valsalva gets stuck at 15, 30 feet. They're frustrated, their ears hurt, it doesn't matter how hard they equalize, it just doesn't work. They need to learn, if you're a student, you need to learn the Frenzel method of equalization. So you want to ask them that. Do they teach Frenzel? Some don't. Some don't do that until the next course. Some do it. So if they say yes, the next question is how much time do they spend on it, right? So I have an online course that I developed for my students years ago that teaches the Frenzel equalization method. And I will tell you, 90% of the people that buy that program are people that spend a lot of money on a freediving course. They got stuck at 15 feet. They heard about my course. They bought my course, and then they had to pay to go back to finish their course. And when I talk to those people, I say, did the instructor teach Frenzel? And sometimes they say no. And sometimes they say, yeah, they put a slide up and they spent a couple minutes on it, but they didn't have the time to actually teach it properly. Before I created my online course, I used to spend an hour. I started an hour in class to teach my step-by-step method learning to do Frenzel, and it worked great. I could teach them in class if I spent an hour, but what I found is I would take the students to the ocean in that afternoon, and half the people that learned to do Frenzel in my classroom couldn't do it in the water because all the other factors, right? It's one thing to do Frenzel sitting in my classroom when you got nothing else to think about, as opposed to doing it upside down, holding your breath, kicking like this. What's the follow the line? Don't have your snorkel in. Is that a shark? Where's the plate? What the heck does this guy want me to do? There's so many things that what I found is that the students needed time to practice the skill till they could get on autopilot, which is why eventually I created that online course, because I wanted them to learn Frenzel before they walked in the door. I wanted Frenzel to be mastered before they walked into my classroom. So another thing you want to ask about is, do they teach Frenzel? I'll have Ray put a link to that equalizing course. What I will tell you is if you were doing the Valsalva method, I would highly suggest you go through my online program, learn and master Frenzel before you show up for the freediving class so you get the most out of it. The good news is if you go to that program, the link, and you scroll down, there's a video on there that will allow you to determine if you are doing it the right way or the wrong way. So don't buy it. Don't just buy it. Go make sure you're doing it the wrong way before you buy it. Because if you're already doing Frenzel, then you don't need to purchase the program. But if you're doing Valsalva, and there's a video on that page that will allow you to figure out which one you're doing, if you're not doing Frenzel, I definitely recommend buying the program so you get the most out of your freediving class. All right, so that's kind of an abbreviated version of what I went over in my podcast. Hope this is helpful to you. Definitely just spend some time, get on the phone. You just got a lot of information. And if you find, 2, 3 freediving instructors and you ask them all these questions, you're going to be able to figure out which is the better program. Now, you're probably going to find better programs more expensive, but that's the way things typically are. Now instead of just choosing a class based on the agency of the price, you're going to be able to dig down and get the information and all those things, find out what's most important to you so that you can make a better decision on your freediving class. So as I mentioned, I got tons of online courses. I've got the free safety course. I've got a free course on how to increase your bottom time. I've got the equalizing courses I talked about. And then I've got an at-home freediving training program, which is going to train your freediving physiology in order to better deal with low oxygen levels, high CO2 levels, how to minimize and control your contractions, your lung volume, your diaphragm flexibility, all of these things, right? It's a 5 of the most effective dry land training exercises that I know of. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it informative. And if you want to hear more from me, you can check out my podcast, which is Freedive Live.
Thanks again to Ted for that very informative episode. Check out Ted's own podcast, Freedive Live, where you'll get a wealth of knowledge about freediving. If you want access to his free safety course, go to freedivepodcast.com/safety. where you'll also find a free course on how to take a 20 to 30% bigger breath, as well as paid courses like Fixing Your Equalization, which I have personally purchased myself and took to help improve teaching Frenzel equalizations to my own students. Dive safe and never dive alone.
20 years stuck in the office, and now he's traveling the world. Just one breath and diving deep, he's healthier and happier than ever. freedive nomad. He's found what he wants to do. A freediving podcast for total beginners like you. Freedive nomad, the peace into the deep blue. Make the dream come true. You can do this too.